a certain thing. Now, what do? You do to them what they wanted to obligate the guy. If the first pair of witnesses wanted to kill the guy, you kill the first pair of witnesses. First pair of witnesses wanted to cause the guy to get lashes, give the witnesses lashes. First pair of witnesses wanted to obligate the guy money, give him how much money you want to obligate. That's what you have to go ahead and obligate the witnesses. That's the general rule. The pasuk says, "Vasisim lo kasher zamam la'asod lachi." You do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the guy who they framed. Any questions on this so far? Any questions?
Yeah, isn't the punishment described by the Torah?
The punishment described by the Torah is va'asitim lo. You do to them what they, the witnesses, try to do to the innocent fellow. That's what you do to them. Now, obviously, what's the point of that punishment? Is to deter people from coming to frame somebody. If people want to frame somebody, they need to know you framed this guy. Whatever you framed them, it's going to happen to you. And hopefully that will serve as a deterrent that the person won't go ahead and frame anybody. That would be the point of the Torah. The Torah is not interested in punishing people. So it's interested in getting people not to do the wrong thing. So but the Gemara says that there's exceptions to the rule. Everyone, if you want to tell people that we're starting, there are exceptions to the rule. And we had in the Mishnah 2 exceptions to the rule. We had a case if you want to obligate if you want to frame a Kohen, and you say that the Kohen is not a proper Kohen. How does a Kohen become not a proper Kohen? If he was born from an inappropriate union. If you say that the father married a divorcee, you say that the father's a Kohen, but he married a divorcee, and a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. The child becomes a halal. The child becomes unfit. And therefore, that's what these witnesses come and say, "Good morning, Morris." These witnesses come, Mark, you're on time. We just started, and to get a little head start. Just give me a little intro. The witnesses come and say that this kid's mother was previously divorced. We all know the father's a Kohen. There's no question about the father being a Kohen, but his mother was previously divorced. And therefore, because of that, the child is not fit for kahuna, because the Torah says a Kohen can't marry a divorcee, and also says, "Good morning, Mr. Haber." We just started on time, Mr. Haber. That's why you're on time. So, and the Torah says you can't. A child of such a union is a halal. But the Torah says, don't marry a divorcee because you're going to ruin your child. You're going to make your child li'chalel zaro. You're going to profane your child. You're going to make your child chulin. And they're going to take away that holiness of the child that he has right to eat truma. A child of such union can't eat truma. So even though the witnesses, even if the witnesses are kohanim themselves, and they were proved to be false witnesses because they were somewhere else in the world at that time, we don't do to the kohanim what they wanted to do to the child. We don't invalidate them. We give them malchut. They get lashes. And that's one exception to the rule. And another exception to the rule, and that's what the Gemara now is going to say. Morning, Ariel. The Gemara is now going to list 4 exceptions to the rule. Okay? Many times we know in life there's a general rule. Sometimes there's also the rule. Sometimes comes an exception, right? So here we have an exception to now the Gemara is going to list 4 exceptions. We had in the Mishnah 2 exceptions, and now the Gemara is going to reiterate the 2 exceptions from the Mishnah and the Freitag, and also is going to list an additional 2 exceptions to the rule. And that's what we're going to be doing right now. Good morning, Yosef and Sadiq. So the Gemara says like this.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Morning. Tana Rabbanan. We have 2 lines in the wide lines on Beis Amid Beis. On 2B, Tana Rabbanan. It's the middle of the line. Beis Amid Bet, however you might want to say it. Okay? You got it? Yaron, you got it? Tana Rabbanan. Mr. Safdie? Okay. Tana Rabbanan. Dalit Varim. David, you got it? You see the first word of the line is V'chol. You have it? Tana Rabbanan. Dalit Varim Ne'amu Be'edim Zomer. There were 4 things said, 4 things four different people that were not part of the general rule. Four exceptions were said by Edom Zomim. Ein Na'asim ben Gerusha ben Chalutza. The Edom Zomim do not become a ben Gerusha ben Chalutza. We do not do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other fellow if they wanted to make the Kohen a child of a divorcee or a child of a Chalutza. We do not. Right over here, right here. We do not make the witnesses. Ariel, you have it? We do not make the witnesses of Ben Chalutza, Ben Charutza. Morning, Nathan. We do not do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the guy they framed when it comes to framing a Kohen. And the Gemara earlier said what the reason for it, why it's an exception to the rule, right? You tell me it's an exception to the rule, we have to know why it's an exception. The Gemara said that earlier. The next category, the next exception. Good morning, Boker Tov. Ein golin la'ari miklat. If two guys framed somebody and said that this guy was the one who murdered the person unintentionally, the Torah says when your person murders someone unintentionally, kills someone unintentionally, he goes to Ari Miklat. He goes to one of the cities of refuge. You guys to stay, go to exile until the Kohen Gadol dies. So we say he does not go to Ari Miklat. These witnesses who framed this guy, who said that this guy was the one behind killing this guy by Bishogeg unintentionally. The Torah says if someone is in a forest or and it's a case to learn other cases similar, and you're chopping with an axe, and the head of the axe goes flying and kills somebody, you have to go to Golo. Torah says you have to go to exile for such a thing. You killed somebody, and obviously there was something you could have done. You could have been a little bit more careful. It's not a complete negligence, but it's not a complete accident. You have to go to exile. That's what the Torah says. But what about if somebody says we find the guy dead in the forest, and we don't know who killed him? Who was the one? How he died? We see an axe and the head of an axe on him. Looks like it got dislocated from the handle of the axe. And two witnesses come and say, "We know this guy did it. We know this guy did it." And then it comes out that they were in some other country. Two other witnesses say you couldn't have been there. You were in China at that time. So what do we say? We don't send these two witnesses to exile like they wanted to do to that guy. Rather, what do we do? They get lashes. That's another exception to the rule. That's case two. Those are the two exceptions that we already knew from our Mishnah. Now the Gemara today is going to introduce other exceptions to the rule. By the way, if anybody has anything to share, please don't be afraid to speak up. Number three, ve'ein mishalmim es kofer, and they don't pay kofer. Kofer, many people would translate is like ransom. What does that mean? Kofer means if, let's say, someone's animal killed somebody. Someone's animal, he didn't watch his animal went out and he killed somebody. The law is we kill the animal. The animal gets killed. So that's the law. But there's no monetary payment if the animal killed the person. The only thing that has to be done is that the animal has to get killed. But if the animal, for some reason, the court did not kill the animal, and the animal already killed three people, upon the fourth time he kills, now there becomes a monetary payment as well. What's that monetary payment? The monetary payment is kofer. Kofer is a certain amount of money. Now, there's a question, what is this kofer? So some say you have to pay the value of the person who was killed. They would assess the value, how much that person's value is. The court has to figure out up to the court to figure out what to assess that value of that person. And depending on what type of person and abilities and capabilities and talent that the person had, it's obviously the value would be assessed. That's one opinion. The other opinion is called the main nizik, the value of the person who was damaged, the victim. The other opinion in the Gemara is that we pay, that the value that they pay, the owner of the animal pays, is his own value. So he has to redeem himself. Because really, he should really, instead of him being killed for his animal killing this person, so he's like redeemed by having his value being given instead of him himself getting killed. So that's the kofar. There's two opinions exactly. How do we evaluate this money, this payment? What it's a dangerous animal if he has to be watching. Right, so the owner has the responsibility to watch it, and really we're supposed to kill the animal the first time, so he'll never get to a fourth killing. Well, what happened is if it did damage to the person, then there's fine. Meaning, if it's damage to a person and the person does not get killed, then the owner has to pay monetary damage. You know how much the guy got hurt, and as a result that his value was lessened. But if he went ahead and the person died, got killed, then the punishment is not a financial punishment unless it was the fourth time, the fourth offense. You pay. You don't watch your animal. If he goes into someone else's property and he eats fruit, you have to pay the value of the fruit. He goes down if the animal walks onto the other guy's property, you don't watch it, and he stepped on things and he ruins it. You have to pay for it. These Torah sets the obligations. You as an animal owner, you have obligations. You don't watch your animal walk into someone's property, eat it. You have to pay. No game. No free ride, as they say. Yeah, that's not being careful. You want to have an animal, but you can't, and not at someone else's expense. Yes. First 3 times, there's no payment. Right. Only on the fourth time. Right. But we're supposed to kill the animal. Wait. The Gemara asked the question. You're supposed to kill the animal the first time. How could it ever kill 4 times? The Gemara asked the question about the Kama. You're supposed to kill the animal after the first time he killed someone. Now, how could the animal ever kill 4 times? You're supposed to kill it if. So the Gemara gives scenarios what the case is if the animal actually wasn't killed the first time. You have to pay. Right. It's like kofen nafsho. It's like a ransom. It's like you're giving your for yourself. You're atoning for yourself. But we're going to see how we understand kofer in a minute. Yes. So you owe the money. The court has to assess. The court has to assess what you owe. If you cause that damage, you have to. You're responsible. Like we're going to see, a guy steals from somebody, right? You steal someone's diamonds, right? Steal millions of dollars, and then you go to Las Vegas and someone goes to and he blows all the money. So what do we do with the guy? And the guy doesn't have money to pay up. He stole something. He has no. The Torah says you sell the guy as a slave. You have to pay it back. How are you going to say pay? You'll sell it as a slave. You'll pay back the money. The Torah says. He has no money to pay. So, but you have your body. You can do labor. You can work. That's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to pay. So that's case 3. That if they framed somebody and they said that he's his animal, they were witness to his animal killing this person for the 4th time. And 2 other witnesses say you could not have been witness to it. You were somewhere else. You can't come to court and say that you witnessed such a thing. And we saw from the Sefer Chinuch yesterday that it could be that sometimes people frame someone. Not always is it vicious. Most of the time we say when someone frames someone means that he's coming to court and he's out to get the guy. He frames him, right? That's the usual terminology. But the Sefer Chinuch seems to say that, let's say you have a good hunch that this guy did it. Or most probably the guy did it. And let's say this guy did it, but you weren't there. So sometimes the guy says, I tell you, Ruvain borrowed $1,000 from me. I have no witnesses. I said, what's the law? I can't get the money. I have no witness, and he denies it. The halacha is anytime you make a loan, it has to be a paper trail. The halacha says you're not, or witnesses. You're not allowed to lend money without witnesses or without a document. I can't let. That's the halacha. I can't lend you $1,000. You can't lend me $1,000 without some sort of document. I owe you. I have to write an IOU to you. Or you have witnesses on the deal, because people could forget. People could forget, or people could intentionally deny. So you don't want to create a scenario that's open someone up for such a thing. Good morning, Jaime.
Morning.
Morning. So, but the problem is, people might want to come and say, I have no way to prove it. I'll tell two of my friends to come forward, and they trust me that it happened. And they'll come and they'll testify that this is what happened. They saw the loan. They're not being vicious. They think they're doing they come and say the truth. They trust their friends, and it might be true. Not a question whether it happened or didn't happen. But if these two guys didn't see it, you can't come to testify. I don't care if it's true. If you guys didn't see it, you come to court and you say you saw the loan happen for the date, and you weren't there. It has nothing to do whether it's true or not. But you're gonna have to pay to this guy that you said borrowed the money, because you were not there to testify about this. So now, Jaime, we're on Beis and Beis 2B in the art school. What page is it? 2B what? 2B3.
Thank you.
What's 2B4? What line on 2B4? Okay, they're fine there. I should get myself also. I'll be able to check it out. In English, where is it? 2B what? 2B2, 3 lines before 3. 2B3. 2B2, 3 lines before 2B3.
Thank you.
Okay, so now on case. So in that case, the Gemara says, if these two witnesses framed the guy and they say his animal killed this person, and we have two other witnesses that say you guys cannot say that because you weren't there. You did not witness it. You were in another country. So you would have thought, and you would have thought that these guys would have to pay what they framed this guy. That the court made a verdict that based on the testimony of the first pair of witnesses, the owner of the animal needs to pay a certain amount of money. Let's say whatever it was, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. And now, subsequently, two of the witnesses say that you two guys were with us in another country. So you would have said, let these two guys pay what they wanted to cause the first guy to pay. The chidush here, the novelty here is that we do not do that here. It's an exception to the rule. The witnesses who say that they saw that this guy's ox killed this person for the fourth time he killed, and the court originally accepted those first pair of witnesses, and the court said you have to pay a certain amount of money. If the second pair of witnesses come and say these first pair of witnesses are false, they're with us, the first pair of witnesses do not pay that ofer, they get lashes. They get lashes, and we'll have to see why. It's another exception. Exception number 4, the einim karim be'evet ivri. They do not get sold as a Jewish slave. Sometimes if a person steals, and let's say he stole money and he doesn't have the way to pay it back, he has no money to pay it back, he blew the money that he stole. So what does the Torah say? The court will sell him as an eved. The court will sell him as a slave to pay. If a guy he stole money, he has to pay it back. That Torah says, what's the punishment for stealing money? Punishment is pay it back. That's what Torah says. Torah does not send the guy to jail for stealing money. Torah says you steal money, you pay it back. And if you don't have the ability to pay it back, if you blew the money, so what does the Torah say? You sell him. Let him be a slave and let him work it off. And so that's the general rule. But if two people framed the guy and they say, by the way, we saw this guy, there was a theft. Somebody, let's say there was a theft in someone's home. And two guys come to court and say, we know who did it. We witnessed the guy who stole the stuff. We were there, we watched, we saw the guy, we were witness to it. And they come to court, and based on their testimony, the court gave a verdict that this guy that they said that stole that this guy was the one who stole it. Based on the testimony, they claim Ruvain stole it, and the court says, okay, based on the testimony, Ruvain needs to be, and Ruvain has no money. Ruvain needs to be sold as a slave. And right after that comes in two witnesses into the court and say, hey, those two witnesses who claim that this guy stole the money, these two witnesses could not have seen it. They were in another part of the world at that time. They were with us. So you would have said, what would you say? Let these two pair of witnesses, this pair of witnesses, let them be sold as a slave. That's what they wanted to do to this guy. They wanted this guy to be sold as a slave. So we should say, do to them what they want to do to the other guy. Comes the Bright and tells us, no, this is the fourth exception to the rule. We do not sell the first pair of witnesses. What do? We give the first pair of witnesses lashes. Malkut. We're going to give them lashes for going ahead and doing this terrible thing of framing somebody, of testifying with something that they did not know. And we're going to see also what the reason for this exception to the rule. Okay.
So all these four exceptions.
Get lashes. All the four exceptions, the Rambam writes, all of them get lashes. That's the exception. That's exactly. Now, Rabbi Akiva, it might depend. Most likely, I would think it's less severe if we analyze. I think to me it looks less severe because lashes is like let's say some of the cases. First of all, if they go ahead and say a guy lost his kahuna, his kohen, he framed the guy and said you have no right to eat truma anymore, which would be such a serious thing to ruin kahuna for this guy, for his children, and his forever. During lashes, it's not a free ride, but again, they have someone in the court that sees if the guy can handle it. He's not going to get killed. They're not allowed to give lashes, 39 lashes. They think the guy's going to get killed as a result of that. So it's a lot of lashes, but I think he gets over with it. But making someone invalidating a kohen forever, and his children forever, or going to Orei Mikla, going to exile. I think it's much worse to go to exile, and now you have to be uprooted from your place, from your town, from your home. I think it's much worse than getting the lashes. No one wants the lashes. No one wants any of it. But I would think it's less of a punishment in most. Right. Being sold as a slave. I think it's a bigger punishment to be sold as a slave than to get the lashes. And it could be that's maybe behind part of Hashem's Rahmanis. Maybe that's part of Hashem's mercy for whatever reason. He doesn't want people to be sold as Jewish slaves. He doesn't want people to have to go to exile. He doesn't want people to lose kahuna. So these are things, because these are very serious, and maybe for whatever reason, therefore he's more lenient in these cases. We'll see more in the Gemara. Yes. It's a Braita. It's rabbis of a Braita. It's rabbis that live the similar time period of the Mishnah. That's a very right. It's a very good question. Everyone's asking a very good question. Why did the Mishnah not list all the cases of exceptions to the rule? There is such a concept that a Tana is not like a peddler. The Gemara. A peddler who has wares, who has merchandise, he lists all his different. I have this to sell. I have this to sell. He has a whole list of things to sell. The Tana is very short and concise. It does not list always all different things. So it could be the Tana gives only certain cases of exceptions, but he showed us there are exceptions to the rule. Perhaps the Tana wasn't interested in giving us all the exceptions. But it's a good question to look into more anyways, with other people give it just to see if they give that answer that I'm suggesting, or they give other answers why the Tana did not mention these other cases. Because these other cases are unanimous. Meaning, we don't find anybody arguing on these additional two cases. We're going to find Rabbi Akiva, who's going to have a fifth case. But his case, it seems to be not universal, but it's his opinion. When Rabbi Akiva says, that means it's not everybody says it, it's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. What's Rabbi Akiva? What's case 5? Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amru, the name Rabbi Akiva, they said, Ein mishalmim al pi atzma. They don't pay based on their own testimony. Now what does that mean? If they turn themselves in, so there's different ways to understand the Gemara. One way to understand the Gemara, if let's say the Eidim Zoamim, they go ahead, they testified about somebody, they framed somebody, And after they framed the guy, they walk into court and they come into court and they say, by the way, we made up a story. It's not true. Whatever we said, they couldn't sleep at night. Their conscience got to them, thank God. And they said, when we walked into court, we were lying. We made up this story. We weren't there. What did you say? Nobody came to make them zomimim. Nobody said that these guys are with us. They themselves did tshuva. They did tshuva. They repented. Baruch Hashem. Great, it's great. They were honest. They come into court and they say we were. So, according to, that's one way to learn the Gemara. We do not give them the penalty of Edom Zomim in that case. If they turn themselves in, they don't pay. They don't pay. They don't get killed. Nothing. No penalty. They don't get nothing. Nothing. According to Rabbi Akiva, nothing. They gave testimony here. They gave testimony. Yes. So you have a question of Daniel, right? You're asking a question. If Daniel's asking a question, once you give testimony, you can't go back on your testimony. I think that's what you're asking. So that's the issue with this shot. How could they go ahead and, meaning the question is, there's a rule that once witnesses come to court, even once you give testimony, you can't change the story. Right. So once you guys give testimony, but the question is like this: do we split it? There's something called Palgina Dibur. Do we say, okay, you're not going to be believed, whatever you testify, we will believe, like Nathan said, already was done. The court accepted it, but maybe we're not going to change your testimony. You can't go back on what you testified. But maybe regarding yourself, could we say, we'll say, regarding what you testified, we'll accept. Because once you testified, you can't go back on testimony. A guy can't come into court today and testify A, tomorrow comes into court and testify B. That contradicts his testimony. We don't listen to you. You come to court and say, I want to change what I said. No. If we checked you out beforehand, you were, what? To talk a little loud, everybody wants to hear you, Nate. We said that perhaps, right. Right, it might be, if every day a person's going to change his story, it's going to be, you're never going to know what to believe, you're going to undo every day. But so maybe the thought would be, to answer Daniel's point, is the following: we're not going to change his testimony. The court accepted his testimony, that stands. But the question is regarding himself. Will we believe it regarding himself? We're not going to change his testimony regarding everybody else, but regarding himself, when he says, I did the sin, I framed the guy. If I go to court and I say, I owe you $1,000, the law is, I owe you $1,000. I say I borrowed $1,000 from you. What's the law? I admitted that I owe you the money. Here, I don't say I admit that I borrowed money from you. I say that I said a false testimony. So now the question is, maybe the court should believe me regarding myself, that now if it's true that I said the false testimony, I wanted to cause you this damage, and so maybe I should pay this amount of money because based on my admission. So comes Rabbi Akiva and says, if you admit that you said false testimony, the court will not obligate you on your admission. And the Gemara will explain what the reason for Rabbi Akiva is. Why won't the court obligate you for your admission? You can't indict yourself, correct. There is such a thing, Ein Adam Meisem Atam Rasha. You can't make yourself a wicked person. You can't indict we're not going to punish you based on your own admission. We can punish a person based on witnesses going ahead and saying that we saw that you did a certain thing. But for a person to turn himself in, the court will not accept that. So God deals with it. God deals with it. He'll take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. What? But this case, we will not get lashes. Why? Because there's no witnesses on the deal. and he will not get lashes. And by turning himself in, he will not get lashes. He will not get lashes. Yes.
I'm sorry, just to quote what Rashi says, they didn't make the Pesach.
They didn't. Rashi said again. There was a verdict. Which Rashi? Now, but we're explaining now where Rashi's shot. For Rashi, the only time we punish witnesses is only when the court gave a verdict. They made a verdict, but and when it comes to capital punishment, the court did not yet execute the verdict. They gave a verdict, but they didn't kill the guy yet. Now, which Rashi? Now, I'm going to say that which Rashi you're referring to? Yes. Now, right. We're gonna go. Now we're gonna say. Rabbi Daniel's pointed out to Rashi. We're gonna now say Rashi's cut. Rashi has a different understanding of the Gemara. Listen to Rashi's understanding. The guys were found zomamim. They were found false witnesses in this court. This court witnesses came and said that these guys, second pair of witnesses came and said that this first pair of witnesses framed somebody. And the court made them zomamim. And the court said, you guys are zomamim, you are framers. Now, what's the rule? After the court says that they're framers, then the court needs to go, then the original defendant now goes to court and says, now I want to get paid for what these guys were framing me. They framed me. Until now, good morning, Jaime. Until now, I was the defendant. Now, today, tomorrow, I turn into the plaintiff. I was on trial because the guy said, I was on trial because the guy said that I owe the $1,000. Right? I was on trial because the guy said I did such and such a thing. Then these two guys who framed me subsequently became zomamim. They were found guilty of framing me. So now I, the defendant, now I'm going to come to court tomorrow. I'm going to say to the court, this guy now, these two witnesses owe me money because they framed me. Right? Is that correct? Is that what's going to happen? The defendant today will be the plaintiff tomorrow. Correct? But he was a false defendant because they framed him. Right? Every time someone's framed, he's the defendant. Now, before he had a chance to come to the court to say to the court, I want to get paid for what these two witnesses wanted to do to me, these two witnesses run off to another court. They go to another court and they turn them and they say, we were in the first court. The first court found us to be framers, but the first court never gave us any obligation of money yet for being the framers. Now they come to the second court, so they're turning them. So this is called turning themselves in, and now they do not have to. Now they get off the hook. Now this is a very difficult thing to understand, because what happened in the second court? They turned themselves in the second court, but the first court already found them guilty. So doesn't seem like to be the normal case of turning oneself in. Turning oneself in is okay. So some understand that if they turn themselves into the second court, they do not have to pay to the second court. The second court does not have the power to ask them for the money because if the first court would have obligated money, once the first court obligated money, Jake, then they have to go ahead and pay. Then any court could go ahead and collect the money from them. It's like you admit I owe money. Anytime a person admits that they owe money, they would have to pay it. But here they're saying that they were found guilty in the first court, but the first court never gave them an obligation of money yet. And now they turn themselves into the second court. So therefore, the second court will not be able to go ahead and obligate them the money that they're admitting to. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva looks at this as a fine. I'm going to give you another example. The Torah says if somebody steals something, someone steals, I steal someone's animal, or I steal someone's dog, I have to pay for the dog. If I've witnessed that, if I'm caught, the witnesses catch me that I stole the dog, I have to pay double. to pay double. Torah says kefil. Torah says you pay double unless if now. So how does it work by paying double? The value, let's say the dog is worth $100. The dog itself is the financial thing that I stole. I owe the money for there's two responsibilities in here. There's something called money. There's a money value that I took. I took a value of $100. And now not only that, but then there's a fine. The Torah assesses a fine. A fine is called a knas. A fine is it's not the financial loss that I caused to somebody. It's like a parking ticket. You didn't cause the city any real loss. The city gives you a fine, whatever the fine is that they give you, it's called a knas. So this extra $100 on the dog that I need to pay, besides giving the $100 dog back, giving the $100 back to steal the dog, I got to pay additional $100. That's called a fine. If I turn myself in and I say, you know what, I'm the
Rabbi, we don't hear you for the last 5 minutes. We can't hear you.
Yosef, we had a little technical difficulty. I think we're back. You hear us now?
I can hear you now, yes.
So now look, now we're going to look at with that background.
The last 5 minutes, so if you can summarize it would be nice.
Yes. We're talking about the idea. We're going to read the Rashi now, so you'll see what we're saying right now. Look at the Rashi. Rashi says, Ein mishama fi atzmam. The Rashi is on the left corner. The headline is about 5 lines, 6 lines for the wide lines. Listen how Rashi gives the case. Im huzbu bebezdin. They became framers. They were found guilty in Bezdin number 1. Now, once they became framers, the defendant now wants to go after collect from them because they framed me. Now I want to come to Bezdin to say you guys have to pay me. But before I had a chance for the court to obligate them the money, Asher Baruch, they ran away. These witnesses ran. They came to another court. And they admitted we were framers in another court. So if they admitted that they framed this guy in another court. So we say that if they come to another court and they turn themselves in, they're going to get off the hook. So we could explain it. They're going to get off the hook in the next court. The next court will, because the first court never gave a judgment of money yet. The first court only said, we found you to be guilty of framing. Witnesses came and made the first pair of witnesses framers. So now you guys are framers. You guys, if the first court would have said, therefore you have to pay $1,000, then if they run to another court, the other court will be able to obligate them that money. If they admit, because then they're admitting to an obligation that they have. Like anytime I admit I owe you money, the court will find, if I come to the court and I say I owe you $1,000, fine, I gotta get paid $1,000. I admitted. That's called Hodos Baldin. Admission is like 100 witnesses. But here the first court never obligated me money yet. I now obligated, I'm coming to turn myself in to say I'm obligated. And what type of money do I say I'm obligated? Not money that I actually caused the loss of a guy. Penalty money. Money for attempting to cause a loss to someone else. So when you turn yourself into another court and you're turning yourself in and you say you owe penalty money, that court will not obligate you to pay that penalty money. Some say no court can obligate you. Some say the first court could obligate you. The second court cannot obligate. That is the issue over here. We'll see more about this tomorrow. It's a complicated point, this last point, but to be continued. TBC, to be continued. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all for joining. You could if you want, it's up to you. Amen.
You can do your own minyan down there already. Yaron, you should be the Chazan. You know, they have a minyan there already.
We have minyan, yes.
Yeah. It's better with small minyan than big minyan.
But we didn't hear you for 5 minutes. Where have you been?
I'm here all day.
I am to have a good day.
Yom Tov.
Yosef,
Morning, Charles.
it was amazing.
I'm taking the charger off. Rabbi doesn't like to charge it over.
Why?
You know, no, you can tell. You know what?
You pray here, Rabbi.
Put it back. Wait, I'm going out to play with the guys.
Charge it over here.
Yeah. I don't want to charge it here. People could fall over.
And meeting, Rabbi?
Yeah.